Morning and good afternoon. Welcome everybody. This is already the 4th day of the Dutch Caribbean Research Week 2023. And I'm saying good morning for the people in the Caribbean. There it's 8 a.m. And I'm saying good afternoon from the people in the Netherlands and other European countries where it's 2 p.m. And as I said, it is the 3rd edition and the 4th day. Yesterday, at the end of the last session, I went into Gather for a little bit, and I saw that people were into Gather, socializing and interacting with each other. Thank you for doing that. It was really nice seeing you in Gather, and I hope that today, during the breaks and after today's sessions, you will do the same. Speaking about Gather and Friday, you can still vote for your favorite poster pitch. You can do that on the DCRW platform because tomorrow we will have the poster sessions and those will be held in Gather as well. So it is very nice of you if you would go in Gather today and already get to know the platform so you won't get lost tomorrow. As you know, each day has its own theme. Yesterday's theme was environment and climate. Today we'll be talking about culture and identity. Speaking of yesterday as well, we had a lot of live streams from the Terra Mar Museum in Bonaire. And that's why I would like to thank again the Terra Mar Museum and our keynote speaker, Dr. Stacy McDonald. We also had some live intermezzi from Bonaire. And here we had the video on the Zoom. We had several oral presentations, pitches, and our content moderator of yesterday was Danique Traulon. Again, a big thank you to you. Today, we also have a keynote speaker and a content moderator. But before I introduce those two, we will go into something else. It's gonna be a pitch video initiative, and this will be from the Learning Orchestra Aruba. From the Learning Orchestra Aruba, we will first hear from Susan Overmeer. And after that, we will watch a compilation video that will give us an insight in the projects by the Learning Orchestra Aruba. So I hope you're ready to hear from Susan first, and then we'll learn about the Learning Orchestra in Aruba. So sit back and enjoy our first two videos of today.
Hello, I am Susan Overmeer. I'm the coordinator of the Music Teacher Department of the Royal Conservatoire in The Hague. I will inform you about some cooperations between our department and the Learning Orchestra project of Aruba. But first, let me introduce to you Juliette van Rommond, who is the project leader of the Learning Orchestra.
Hi, my name is Juliette and I'm working at the Learning Orchestra in Aruba. The Learning Orchestra in Aruba is a social project. We are at 5 schools in Aruba. We give children the opportunity to play on an instrument from a real orchestra. We have a lot of instruments. We have violin, we have cello, we have flute, we have clarinets, we have trumpets, we have trombones, we have drums, and we have contrabass and horn. So together they will play a lot of music. We started in 2019, and so we are almost 4 years now without the COVID pandemic. We also do the online movies. When the corona pandemic was present here on Aruba, there was a lockdown and we wanted to have the children to have music lessons. So we started with online lessons and we record a teacher from the higher education. And we use the curriculum of the Netherlands, or the Learning Orchestra in the Netherlands. So that's what we do.
In March 22, I went to Aruba for the first time, together with a student of my department, who comes from Aruba. We came there to invest how we could help the people of Aruba who are working in music education field. We invested how we could work on quality in music education and how our Department of Music Teachers can help. We found out very quickly that there is a huge need of trained and schooled music teachers on the islands and also in the project of the Learning Orchestra. In November of 22, I went back to give a training to the teachers of the Learning Orchestra project. It was about group didactics. These teachers are musicians. Some of them have a conservatory background, but most of them are amateurs who never taught before. And most of them never worked with a group of children, and that's a really difficult job. For example, to train 10 children at the same time on playing the trumpet. We trained them to teach more playful, less focus on the results and more focus on the joy. Not too much focus on the reading process and notation, but focus on listening, reacting and making music together. In March 23, the teachers of the Learning Orchestra project came to the Netherlands for all kinds of workshops and trainings. They went to the Conservatoire of Ghent in Belgium, and they also went to the Learning Orchestra project of Amsterdam. But for a few days they were with us in The Hague. And at the Royal Conservatoire we continued on working on group didactics. A few students of my department prepared the workshops and the collaboration went really nice. One evening we organized a Caribbean night. Our students prepared this as well, just to celebrate the power of Caribbean music. It was organized for anyone who could attend. Students, teachers, but also people in the neighborhood of our conservatoire, and it was a great success. At this moment, one of our students is doing an internship at Aruba, and there are more to come next year, also for internships at the Learning Orchestra project. It's a win-win situation. The teachers of the Learning Orchestra can benefit from the knowledge from our students, and our students can learn a lot about the cultural environment of Aruba and bring that to the Netherlands. There's also a teacher of our department who wants to go to Aruba for a period of 2 months to contribute in music education. We will stay in close contact with the Learning Orchestra, with Juliette and with all the colleagues and friends we have met in Aruba, because that is how they feel, as colleagues and friends.
as well. That was the Learning Orchestra on Aruba. Thank you, Suzanne Overmeer, and of course to all the children who participated in this video. I really enjoyed it. Some of them need a little bit more practice, so see what you can do to help the Learning Orchestra in Aruba. It is time to introduce the content moderator of today. That is Dr. Genevieve Phillips-Durham. You are there, Genevieve. I can see you.
I am here. Thank you.
Oh, nice. Welcome, welcome. And I can hear you as well. Let me introduce you as nicely as possible. Dr. Genevieve is currently the Dean of Humanities and Societies, of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University College of the Cayman Islands. She has a keen interest in contributing to the political, economic, of development, specifically in Caribbean small island states and non-independent territories as such. Much of her academic work focuses on generating indigenous and innovating policy solutions for island-nominated challenges. I think that was a complete mouthful, but I think that introduces you a little bit.
Thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And you will have the Q&A with our oral presentators later today and with our keynote speaker.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. And our keynote speaker today is here in the studio on site with us. Her name is Dr. Angela Roe, and she is a Dutch Curacao Surinamese anthropologist, lecturer, writer, and filmmaker. Her academic interests revolve around race relations, individual and national identity, colonial heritage, the African diaspora, and social and environmental sustainability. That is also a lot. And I think that Dr. Roe can tell a little bit more about herself and, of course, what she will be talking about. Let's introduce her to the stage. Welcome, Dr. Roe. Hi, welcome. Hi. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Yes, nice to have you in the studio. Was it a long commute for you to come here?
Not at all. I work in The Hague, so The Hague represents today.
Nice, nice. So it's like a home game for you.
Very much, very much.
Good to have you here. And the title of your talk, I'm not fluid in the language, so I'll try. Notir cinco de te pareu. Am I in the right direction or?
You're very close. Very close.
Can you translate it for me?
Yeah, we say no tur cinco dede tapareu.
Tapareu.
Pareu.
Nice.
Not all 5 fingers are the same.
Yes, not all 5 fingers are the same. Inclusion, exclusion, and multiculturalism and racism as an integral part of Curaçao's national Yui Corso identity.
Yes, I tried to put as many words as I could.
Thank you. I love that. My whole page is full, only with the title. Are you ready to kick off your keynote?
I am, yes, very much.
A very big applause from the comfort of your home or where you're watching for Dr. Angela Roe.
Hello, everyone. Like I said, it's very exciting to be invited to this conference, to this research week. Big honor to be at an NBO presentation. My talk today is, as it shows, it's a mouthful. We're going to do a lot of things. We're going to talk about multiculturalism, racism, and national identity. We're going to pick apart the Curaçao identity. So hold on, buckle up, and let's see how we get through. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk a little bit about what is national identity, how national ideology, how does it relate to identity and to racism. Then we're going to talk about how this Curaçao ideology developed over time. It's not something that just fell out of the sky. And we're going to talk about multiculturalism. What role does this play in this national identity? Maybe right now you're like, okay, I don't understand none of this, but let's see how it goes. So first of all, identity and national ideology. National ideologies, you should really see those as stories about who we are as a nation, right? So who belongs and who doesn't belong. Everybody can identify, I'm Curaçaoan, I'm Dutch, you have feelings about this, you can describe what that means. But these stories about who we are and who doesn't belong, they justify the hierarchy within our nations. They justify who are the haves and the have-nots, who have privileges, who can be exploited. These stories also inform us constantly about what are our norms, our values, our cultural practices, our beliefs, our behaviors. How should we live? Who should we be? All of these things you may think, oh, I make that up every day on my own, but actually you're born into a society that every day tells you about what is the right way to be. Now, these national stories are communicated to the far corners of our countries, of our nations. Now, Curacao, of course, is not very big, but if you imagine a nation like China, it also has one of those national stories, and it informs hundreds of thousands of millions of people every day about this is who you're supposed to be. This is how we're supposed to be. And it informs people, it unites people who will actually never meet each other. We're all on the same page because of these stories. And we conform to these stories, and we don't even know it, at least most of us. We would die for our nations. We see that when there's a war, people don't even think about it, right? So these stories, these national ideologies are incredible power tools for domination. So now we're going to slowly make our way to the story of colonial history. These national stories also infuse our private lives. It's as if they exist on a very zoomed out high level, but they really trickle down into everything that we do, what we wear, who we interact with, who we fall in love with. Everything is infused with these stories, right? So it shapes our personal, intimate identities. I can tell you a lot about that, but today I will not. The focus is really on that zoomed out story. So let's have a look how this story of Curacao developed over time, right? Because we have 3 eras that I identified in the research that I did. I cannot tell you much about the methodologies, there's no time for this, but let's have a look at this historical development. By the way, when I write YDK, I mean UD Curaçao, child of the island, child of Curacao. And this means Black and white people are now brothers and sisters born from the same soil, the same mother, right? That's the idea of that story. Now, in the colonial era, there was, of course, very explicit racism. There was a strong separation between white and Black. And this was supported by a very strong colonial narrative. So there was not so much a national story, but there was a colonial story that talked about the colony and that said, this is okay, it's justified that white people can steal, exploit, and abuse Black people. That's the power of that story. It could justify that. That story said white is far better than Black. And this story was there to safeguard the privileges of the white groups. The industrial era, right? We jump straight over 300 years. I can tell you so much more about it, but I only have 20 minutes. In the industrial era, things start to change. Now a new story arises that says, well, white and Black can mix. And this is a period that around the world we see this development. This is a period of creolization, of mixing. Mulataje, mestizaje, that's how we call it in South America. And the idea is that, hey, racial mixing is actually good. Initially, people should be separated two categories that can never really be equal, but now we can mix, do a lot of mixing. But it's founded, creolization is founded on the ideal of whitening the black masses. In Papiamento, we call this derecha raza, fixing or improving the race, make it better. And this is when the Curacao identity first arises. Now, this story, we may think of it as, hey, maybe it comes from the black population, but it actually came from the white elites. What happened? Why did they all of a sudden want to mix with black people when they always kept them apart? They were very unhappy that they had to ship all of their riches to the colonial motherland, the Netherlands, right? So these old Dutch elites, they ran the island, they were in charge, and they didn't want to lose all their wealth. But also, they had an identity that says, we are not Dutch, nos nota Holandês. We're not Dutch. We speak Papiamento because that's the language of all the people on the island. They had been born and raised for generations on this island. They did not feel much connection with the Netherlands. So, history, language, their sense of belonging, they say, this island is my home, not that faraway country. This is my people. Now, what happened? Why did they start building the story of mixing? The Shell refinery, Dutch Royal Shell refinery, came in 1916, and this completely changed Curaçao society really fast. It brought a huge flow of immigrants, and the population, it tripled in size, tripled. 200,000 people came. 85% were black, Afro-Caribbean descent, but lots of other people came too. 70 nationalities started to live on this tiny little island. But also, what was very distressing for the white elites is now a new Dutch group from the Netherlands is coming over, and they are in charge. They're taking over. They're much more educated, and they start running the island. And for the lower classes, the black people, all of a sudden there's 85% black people coming in from other islands. So they also take over their job opportunities. So here we see a new neighborhood, Emmastad, which became one of the fancy neighborhoods, it still is. Julianendorp, a gated community. These new white elites, they're pushing aside the old elite. And they're not happy about this. And they notice that among the black population, there's also unhappiness. They also feel threatened by all of these immigrants coming in. So what do? They look for a way to protect their privileges. These old elites, they say, hey, let's unify, right? We were here first. This was our island. We share this history. We're all brothers and sisters from the soil. The other people are not. They're from outside. But we were here. We're born here. Born on the island. We speak Papiamento. They don't. We love this island, right? And we know and we appreciate this old Curaçao culture. This is us. So they create this identity, but it's artificial. And it's an imagined unity that had to replace through more than 300 years of racial segregation and exploitation. So, you think that worked? Let's take a look. So to make it fit, of course, they couldn't talk about what really happened during slavery. So that story is romanticized and downplayed and whitewashed, right? Now we say, oh, we all have these beautiful beaches. We all have the Handelskade and these beautiful buildings in Willemstad. And we all have this Afro-Curaçao culture. We all love it. We used to hate it, but now we love it. Creolization. Mixing, but there's still an undertone of whitening. Did this Curacao story bring improvement? Did it bring social change? Not so much initially, right? So the color hierarchy of white, mixed, black, it remained intact. and racism and inequality, it remained. Now there's a new white elite, and the old white and the mulatto elite, we call them in that time frame mulattoes. It's a terrible word, but I use it. They don't have a lot of wealth, but they are in charge of politics, national reform. They decide the culture. Immigrants come in, they make money. The middle class, the lighter skinned mulatto middle class makes money. They're okay. But the lower classes, the black lower classes, the biggest group on the island, lives in extreme poverty. Sorry, that was too fast. So this proposed unity in the story, like we're now all brothers and sisters from the same soil, it makes racism less visible, but it doesn't take it away. So in the mid-20th century, you see that this story, this new story, it did not yet change the lives and livelihood of the Black population. Now, many people from Curacao will recognize these photographs. These are from the Laborers' Revolt, 1969, May 30. May 30. This is when Willemstad was set on fire. The poor working class was very angry about not having enough money. The story is very complicated. I tell it in a very limited way. But they revolted. And this moved the needle. Okay, so there's Black governments that came out of this. And these Black governments, they were very much against the Netherlands, Dutch colonial ties. And they started to reimagine Curacao in a different way. They said, now everything needs to be Black. The blacker, the better. It's ours, die nosita, nosta manda. We rule. This is a new version of this Curacao identity. So, Papiamento becomes more important. In 2007, it became the official language of 2007. It took that long, but there it is. Afro-Curaçaoan music, traditions, festivities. There's a national holiday. There's Dia de Bandeira. There's all sorts of food. We have a flag. We have a song. We have history. We have statues. We have commemorations. Tula. Was there improvement after this? Yeah, the Black Power movement, they did shift the needle. They made a difference. But the upper class is still predominantly white. The middle classes are still mixed, and the lower classes are still Black. This is a picture of my movie that I made. You can find it on YouTube, and it talks about this. Colonial hierarchy is more fluid, but it's still there. The color hierarchy is still there. So this unity that the Curacao story tells, it's heartfelt more and more, but it's also an illusion. So let's see why. At first, there's the shift towards being more pro-Black, but then there's a shift towards celebrating diversity, multiculturalism. Many people love this word. Think it's a very innocent word. It's a new version, again, a new version of the Curacao story. So usually when we think of multiculturalism, we say, oh, it's a very culturally diverse society, melting pot, cultural mosaic. When you think of Curacao, that's how we often think. Yeah, 70 different nationalities, everybody is welcome, everybody is there. We all love each other. Nos turte Curacao, we're all Curaçaoans. And there's a second definition. And this means in multiculturalism, there is constitutional reform. Now we're in an era where there are legal instruments that say racism is forbidden, discrimination is forbidden. It becomes written in constitutions. So we have these legal frameworks that protects people. And this has to safeguard intercultural equality. But doesn't work. One big thing that it does is it makes inequality less and less visible. So legally, all these tools are now available. But practically, they're not that accessible. All these cultural rights and resources, that are now there, who knows where they are? A lot of people don't know they even exist. When I made my film and I had conversations with people about race and racism in Curacao, people said, yeah, well, it's not as if it's part of the Constitution, right? Racism is not officially forbidden, but it is. But a lot of people don't know this. Who controls these resources? How do we get to them? For instance, who knows that there are various anti-discrimination laws in Curacao and the rest of the island, Suriname? These laws exist, there's treaties, but when I spoke to the highest judge there is, he said nobody has ever taken a racism case to court. What does that mean? So this new version of the Curacao story says, hey, now all people have equal opportunities now because race no longer matters, because we're all equal. See, we have all these legislations. Are you disadvantaged? Are you poor? It's your own fault. You should have done better. You should have made better choices, study harder. Are you successful and rich? Well, then you did the right thing. So they do not acknowledge privilege. Color doesn't matter here. I hear that so much in Curacao. So a national identity story that centers, that focuses on equality and unity, like the Curacao story does, Nos Turta Curacao, are all brothers and sisters, it erases the conversation about inequality. We get into a space of racial denial. Right? This is a very popular t-shirt, YDK, Preto, I'm not black. Blanco, I'm not white, right? They cross it out. I'm a YDK, I'm a Yudi Curacao. That's the same discussion as Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, right? If we cannot talk about the inequality, then we are not talking at all. So we have these racelessness ideologies. We have color blindness. Oh, I don't see color, it doesn't matter. There is this invisible racism because of that. Multiculturalism facilitates that. It also says, hey, the YDK, the Yudi Curacao ideology or story says, oh, we were always ethnically mixed. We're officially mixed. Yudi Curacao are quintessentially mixed. You now have Tambu season, you have Seu, you have Carnival. Papiamento has become the official language. You have had Black presidents since 1969. Folklore is fully Afro-Curaçaoan. Black people now are also in the middle and upper class. But there's no racism anymore. If you still have inequality issues, it's because of you. It's your own fault. Stop the queja. Stop complaining. Stop complaining, they say. So this new story says Curacao is not a black nation. No, it's only 85% black. We're mixed, is what they say. Nos Turta Curacao. So the problem with multiculturalism, which we like to think is such a nice word, is that there is no acknowledgement of the structural advantage of whiteness and the structural disadvantage of blackness, which are the core elements of any racist system. So the consequence of this is that it's difficult to address these past inequalities and violations and also the ones that exist today. Instead, there is whitewashed narratives about history. Most of Curaçao's museums, I've been to all of them several times, they showcase predominantly this white heritage. Architectural heritage preservation, monumentenzorg. It protects the white buildings. Knoekhuisjes, the old slave houses, are disappearing. Monuments and their locations, historical sites, tourism, all focuses on white. So there's so much racial denial, and that means that there is a big silence on the things that are still not right. So my opening question was, what role does multiculturalism play in Curaçao's national ideology? One does not just celebrate diversity. It makes racial inequality invisible. It silences the voice of resistance, and it protects the privileges of the elites. This will be a difficult story to hear for a lot of people because we love our Judy Curacao ideology. We love that story. We find pride in it. I know. I lived on the island for more than a decade. But here it is. Unity and equality are on the top. At least this is my depiction. This is how I picture it. And racial inequality is the bottom of the iceberg. 250 years of slavery and an explicit, judicially supported ideology of race. Where did that go? Did it disappear? No, it is woven into the fabric of our society. And we don't see it. It's made invisible. It has to be deliberately deconstructed before we can remove it. So I have one more picture, also not a very kind one for people who love their Judy Curacao ideology. The Trojan horse, unity and equality, that's the overarching story. And there is our racial inequality that's hidden in the belly of the horse. So my last slide. Racism has always remained part of the Judy Curacao ideology, and together they form one system. This is by design, not by accident. It means that these stories, when we consume them, they make us complicit and we don't even realize it. So until we decolonize deliberately and sufficiently, we are complicit. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Roe. Thoroughly enjoyed that presentation. Some very interesting facts you've presented. Interesting data. I was taking note of the racial denial, and especially I'm just checking to see if there were any questions in the chat thus far. There aren't any, so I'll go ahead and ask one of my own because I was especially interested in you started talking about the history, the stealing, the exploitation, the abuse, and you ended by talking about being complicit to that without confronting the issues and the themes around racism. So I just wanted to find out, you said there was no racism case taken to the court. Tell me about your understanding or your familiarity with the use of the Office of the Ombudsman for something that someone may feel is linked to some sort of injustice.
Yeah, when I did research, and this is of course a few years ago, so I haven't been back to see if this has changed. It's a little bit dated, my observation, but I had a lengthy conversation with the ombudsman at that time, and she said, nobody comes here with such a case. People don't think that this is a good venue to address inequalities. So she said, she was there for 10 years, her predecessor, she said, we've never heard of a racism case coming to the ombudsman. And when I went to the, how do I call it? The chief of the court, the Dutch court, I asked the same question and he gave the same answer. He said, I've never, in all the years that I am ruling this court of Curacao, I've never seen a case on racism.
Wow. I'm wondering in terms of the ombudsman and as well as in terms of the court, because of the smallness of the societies. You also mentioned that Curacao is quite small. I am wondering if in relation to the size of the island, if you think that may present some challenges in terms of you're bringing a case before a court or before an ombudsman where everyone knows everyone, and you still have to make your way, find yourself in such a society. How do you think that affects or the implications of that smallness and familiarity is?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I've heard, for instance, one story of a mother that wanted to enroll her child in a school. She went, a Black mother, she went and she spoke Pimento with the people and she said, I want to enroll my child. They said, no, it's full. She went to her car. She called from the car, spoke in perfect Dutch, no accent. She said, can I enroll my child? And she got the child enrolled on the phone from the car. Right? So she could have filed a case, but she also said, if I do that, the head of the school knows my husband, he might lose his job, I might lose my job, my kid's not going to be anywhere, right? So people are very, very afraid of repercussions, also because, the scale, as you mentioned, but also the lack, it's very personal. All the networks are very intimate.
Thank you so much. And we have one question from Saskia. How do you open the eyes of the people to seeing it in this way? In the way that you've presented, I suppose.
What I tried to do, I made a film. I made Sombra di Color, the shadow of color. Find venues that are easily digestible, that people can understand, that people are interested in. Right, so I think arts, literature, journalism, filmmaking, documentary making, those are the voices of resistance and have always been, right? Other countries, other nations, that's always where the resistance has been. So I think that's where we should continue, right? Selm in the Wind, my former partner, he has this t-shirt that says, Tula taught me, that challenges this notion of YDK, that says, no, we how do I say this? We respect our heritage, our Black heritage. I'm going to name the people that taught me. I'm going to name Alice, Juliana, and all the other big voices of our community, right? So I think media, multimedia, social media, those are really the places where we can make a difference. We have those tools now.
Thank you so much. And I certainly would hope by the next time you speak, you tell us much more about the level of advocacy and that unlearning and relearning of how best we represent the interests of those who are marginalized, whether it's by way of loss of their identity, their culture, their heritage. I do look forward to hearing more of that. So thank you once again for your excellent talk.
Thank you
and
so much.
I think we're back to the studio now.
Indeed, we are back in the studio. Thank you, Dr. Roe. And for now, thank you, of course, Genevieve. We will be back with you for the Q&As with the oral presentations. But for now, thank you so much. I've learned a lot. I still need to watch your movie. But the topic that you're talking about is, of course, a very interesting topic when it comes to culture and identity. And indeed, it remains a topic that we need to talk about, we need to discuss and address, because the battle doesn't end on its own. We need to make sure that we're a united front to make this battle end. A lot of things touched ground as well, from as in Suriname, colorism, all those things. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So today we will kick off with Saran Stewart and Thomas van Gaalen. I see that Saran Stewart is already in the Zoom. Can you please come forward and let me, yes. And is your mic working and everything okay?
It should be.
It is perfect, perfect. Well, Saran Stewart, you're from the University of Connecticut. Title, Emancipation as Unfinished Business, Portraits of Black Women Academics in Higher Education. That is your title, right? And after the oral presentation by Saran Stewart, we will have Thomas van Gaalen from the Radboud University. Title, Radical Solidarities, the Dutch Caribbean in Exchanges over international solidarity 1980 till 1939. And of course, in between, our content moderator, Dr. Genevieve Phillips-Durham, will ask the questions and introduce Thomas. So Saran, if you are ready, the stage is yours. Enjoy.
Thank you so much. Great. My graduate assistant, Stephanie Simpson, she will start us off, but I will go ahead and share a screen. I know we have limited time. So everyone should be able to see the screen. Steph, you can go ahead and start.
Yes, so you already mentioned our title, Black Women Academics, Renderings of Racism, Sexism, and State of Coloniality in the Netherlands. We do want to point out that this is a subset of a larger study where we are currently doing research in 6 different countries, the Netherlands being one of those 6. And as you already introduced my pilot for the day, my advisor, Dr. Saran Stewart, Associate Professor at University of Connecticut. And then we have Dr. Shayla Haynes-Davison at Texas A&M, who is not here. And then myself, rising second-year doctoral student at University of Connecticut. So arguably, one reason for Black women's erasure is the scholarly neglect and limited understanding of their multidimensional experiences, since much of what we know about Black women in education literature emerges from a range of epistemological frameworks and methodologies that really haven't centered Black women in theorization. Given the historical exclusion and underrepresentation and scholarly neglect of Black women in academics, and the literature, as well as their underrepresentation in the academy, this study seeks to center their experiences and illustrate how the effects of multiple intersecting forms of oppression have contributed to the underrepresentation in the Netherlands. Specifically, furthermore, this research study is supported by Black feminist epistemologies, framing our understanding of coloniality and intersectionality, and we use this as our research significance to establish our guiding research question: how do Black women academics in the Netherlands describe their lived experiences at the intersections of race, gender, and state of coloniality? So intersectionality is our overall framework, and it's weaved all throughout our research project. Just a little bit of a refresher, or to familiarize you guys with, intersectionality is a Black feminist epistemology coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. It's used to describe the intersectional subordination that's very specific to Black women's lives. Within our research team, all of us identify as Black women academics from different parts of the US and Jamaica who possess Black feminist sensibilities. We use intersectionality's utility as a theoretical and analytical framework to show how systems of systems of oppression, such as racism, classism, and sexism, can contribute to the intersectional erasure and neglect of Black women experience in higher education and society. Specifically, the interlocking systems of oppression that we're looking at for this study would be racism, or race, gender, and state of coloniality in the Netherlands.
So I will kind of steer you into the analytical space. So as Stephanie started out with, this study is running across 6 different countries currently. Most of the data collection has already been completed. The data started in the Netherlands. Ideally, what has been happening, I'm a Caribbean methodologist born and raised in Jamaica as a satellite colony of Great Britain. I've focused most of my career looking at decoloniality, post-colonialism, and structural racism and anti-Black racism within and outside of these various contexts. So the study includes 2 colonialist countries, and then the remaining 4 satellite ex-colonial countries. Suriname is included, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and we are still seeking to have one more of the former or current Dutch Caribbean islands. And the reason why I want to point that out is because it was really important to kind of pull apart some of this analysis across, and there are 21 Black female academics that are currently in this study. As a part of the analytical framing, we really looked at intersectional erasure, intersectional failure, and then the hopes of the study is to develop more concrete intersectional interventions, okay? So for the sake of time, the focus is strictly on the analysis that has been done on our Dutch colleagues in particular, or with our Dutch colleagues. And so I'm gonna go through a number of the findings right now and move it into this larger framing. Part of the study really tackled new grounds in methodology, because part of the critical components of the study was the essence of feeling completely invisible within their institutions and within the framing of their structures. As a part of the methodology, intersectionality methodology is that Black women feel seen in the process. They are no longer the objects of the research, but they become critical co-participants and co-researchers in the study. What you're seeing here on the screen are elements of what we call intersectional renderings. This is where each of the women were asked to submit an image or likeness of themselves at the intersections of their race, their gender, and the state of coloniality from their perspectives. When they submitted these images, we then worked with another Black female artist who is actually outside of the Netherlands, of Caribbean birth and origin, that re-rendered these images in their likeness. So these women would be seen as how they wanted to be seen. Some of the data emerging are 4 distinct themes under intersectional erasure. I'll only read a couple of them. The first is what we're noticing as hyper-invisibility and disposability of Black femininity, as well as hyper-visibility, Black women tropes, and respectability politics. The first one on the screen really refers to Black women's exoticism in the academy and being the token representative for an entire race, culture, or African diaspora. In this regard, Black women are glorified, marketed, photographed on promotional materials to misrepresent diversity and inclusion within the actual academy. They serve on disproportionately higher service boards or committees related to anything cultural or diversity issues. The hypervisibility provides a glimpse into the role of these double meanings of exoticism. One, the quality or appeal of something striking or unusual, or the very characteristics of something very foreign, right? Hyper-invisibility and disposability refers to, of course, we're looking at that prefix of being above normal, beyond, exceeding, which is the hyper. These are patterns in the data that signify from an external stimulus or extrinsic stimulus, hyper-invisibility or above normal invisibility, which is the extreme state of being ignored or not taken into consideration, ignored in meetings, or what we refer to as disposability of Black women's sensibilities and representation of disposability politics. The second set of intersectional erasure actually is regarded as what we consider hypo-invisibility and that sense of self-preservation. This is where this is intrinsically done to preserve the self, where Black women have repeatedly documented within this study that they are conscious of a choice to self-isolate, to preserve, to disengage, and to remove themselves from the community completely from certain meetings or certain committees. And these are directed acts of self-preservation within the academy to provide a sense of safety in an otherwise very harmful working environment and institutional environment. visibility and the undervaluing of mothering in academia showed up across the different countries, and in particular within the Netherlands. The image depicted by Sarai, all pseudonyms used in the study, of the blindfold over is a direct imaging of how she is viewed within the academy as a mother of young children. She talks about the fact that there is a known knowledge that she is a mother, but mothering is not seen as something that is valued. It is actually seen as a hindrance to promotion and activities within academia. In particular, she noted the time within teaching during the pandemic, and this was pre-vaccines or the release of vaccines, where she was expected to teach online, attend meetings, advise virtually, all while caring for children under the age of 2, and none of that was valued in the space. Intersectional failure, as Crenshaw has noted, looks at the structural intersectionality, the political forms of intersectionality, and the ways in which there are multiple institutional leadership and policy decisions and treatment of Black women academics that are seemingly intentional and reinforces harmful racist and sexist stereotypes and societal norms. And so we looked at 3 different categories of intersectional failure. These were alienation, isolation, enforcement and double blind, and then the censorship and silencing of Black women academics within academia. And then the last to conclude, just real quick, sorry, I'm playing around with these slides, is that within the space and within the larger data set that we do have, academics in former colonialist empires can be described as multidimensional, yet uniquely tied to the interrelated spheres of colonial matrix of power that continues to render them below or subhuman, as Frantz Fanon and Sylvia Winters have documented. These Black female academics are often forced to navigate being both seen, visible, and unseen simultaneously and invisible within academic settings. The social and historical context in which higher education institutions were built to operate within the coloniality of power, in which scholars have had to argue and the need to decolonize these academic institutions. These systems of higher education favor cis, white, patriarchal, colonial vestiges of patriarchy and operate under an androcentric framework of what it means to be an academic, white and often male as well, cisgender male. So given time, I'm gonna stop there so that we can open to questions. And I'll click stop share just very quickly.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Stewart, as well as Dr. Simpson. I am not seeing any questions in the chat just yet, so I'll go ahead and ask one myself. Wow, that can be triggering, can it?
It can be, absolutely. And it's a lot to cover in a very short 10-minute span. So yeah, there's so much more of the data, but yes.
I know. So firstly, I just wanted you to recap. I didn't quite get the countries that you were focusing on. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Suriname, and I didn't get the others.
Yep,
so if you...
No problem. The Netherlands and the United Kingdom.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, in terms of the Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname, for example, whether you think you may discover something that is a bit more nuanced than in Jamaica and Barbados when you do this type of research. Have you already begun seeing, what have you seen thus far?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you asked that question.
Your findings.
Right, because those populations are absolutely have a different demographic than Barbados and Jamaica, and in particular for those who may not know, there's a strong Hindustani or Indo-Trinidadian population in which we know that there has always been a hierarchy of power constructs. Within Suriname, there's a couple of things that are coming out in addition to the hypo-invisibility, is that there is these, the ways in which language is weaponized, the Dutch language in particular, and the ways in which it is used, right, to weaponize against Black women in particular in those spaces. And especially those that are academics there that were not born in Suriname. So there are academics from within Suriname, not born within Suriname, that identify as Black women, in which they do speak Dutch, but they don't speak good enough Dutch. It has been literally the quote, and what that then does for their acceleration in terms of promotion, etc. The other piece that was really interesting was around the colonial subordination within the hierarchy of Indo-Trinidadians versus Hindustanis in the space for how Black women are perceived or feel that they are perceived when it comes to who holds the power, and how that's then reminiscent of the state of coloniality, right? Between both, in that case, British colonialism and Dutch colonialism, that these countries were oftentimes left to the closest in link to their colonial counterparts.
Thank you so much. Thomas is very interested in the third part. You mentioned at the start the intersectional interventions. Have you already started formulating such interventions? And if so, what are they? And to what extent do they build on existing efforts to decolonize universities?
Excellent. Thank you so much. So one of the core elements about intersectional interventions is that we are looking at dismantling or bringing together what do the multiple axes of oppression look like in these spaces. And across the board, the last sets of the data absolutely tackle the strategies, because we had full professors in across the participants, as well as brand new lecturers, right? So there's a spectrum of them. And the strategies that have continued to retain and sustain are the ones that developed critical networks and mentorship programs. So the way that we're looking at it are, where are Black women sensibilities in terms of these community-based networks can help to sustain, retain, and promote them throughout academia, as well as mentorship. The question that was asked commonly and that we're seeing, and we know from some of the data, is that when academics are mentored in academia, they're likely to be more successful. However, that mentorship looks very different for Black women academics when there's so far and few in between that are at various levels and stages in their profession, right? And so we are looking at what does a mentorship program looks like, as well as what does community of scholar network looks like, and not always within the countries, but oftentimes have to exist outside of the countries as well.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated your presentation and look forward to hearing more. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we're on to you now, Thomas van Gaalen of Radboud University, to speak about radical solidarities, the Dutch Caribbean and exchanges over international solidarity, covering the period 1918 to 1939. So Thomas, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, so thank you for having me here. What I'm going to present about today is essentially part of my dissertational project that I'm currently carrying out at Radboud University. It's a historical project, and its tentative title is Radical Solidarities, the Dutch Caribbean, or the Caribbean in general, for the larger project, in exchanges over international solidarity. And to first sort of start out with this concept that is so important for this title, international solidarity. So what is solidarity actually? I define this in this project based on historical literature on, firstly, as a sort of imagined or felt unity. So there is this affective part to solidarity on the basis of shared interests that are usually also have some implication that is political. And that thirdly also obligates political action. And this is not necessarily always the case, but you might, if you express solidarity with a certain group, expect that they also back their promise up with practical action. And my starting point here is international solidarity as it was formulated in socialist discourse in the early 20th century. It was quite a sort of big term, actually sort of a mainstream concept in many periodicals, newspapers, and conversations between socialists across the world that sort of sought to coordinate working class emancipation over the whole world. And as you can imagine, it was still quite a sort of a broad framework because international is basically the whole globe. And many different groups can identify as working class. So it's quite a broadly applicable concept and political framework. And unsurprisingly, it thus resonated also across the world. Also in, for instance, the Caribbean region. What I'm interested in is what actually happened when this sort of broadly circulating concept of international solidarity that could actually mean so many things, but that also had political implications, landed on the ground. So what happened when it sort of intersected with other potential dimensions of identification alongside working class identification? I'm in this sense interested in seeing what, how sort of a global broad concept came to life and gained new forms when being placed in a sort of messy constellation of different forms of identification, such as race, nationality, religion, gender. My question then is, what new conceptions and practices of solidarity came out of these sort of local reconfigurations? How did they clash and how did they overlap? And what did this actually mean for both the solidarities that were formulated, but also the power structures and the dynamics that lie beneath these interactions between socialists? And I'm looking specifically at the Caribbean region here, and also conceptually thinking of it as sort of a node in the sense that many interactions took place in this region in the period I'm studying. I'm looking specifically at 3 islands, so Curacao, Trinidad, and Cuba, and today I'm focusing mostly on Curacao. The Caribbean in this region were a really diverse region. In terms of different classes, different people from different nationalities, ethnicities, but also it was an important link in maritime colonial networks. And radicals and radical thinkers used these networks to actually subvert the colonial systems and spread radical ideas and information across these networks as well. And radical Caribbeans also at the same time had to deal with heavy colonial censorship, persecution. So they also traveled to other regions, employing these maritime networks to gather new ideas or inspiration and putting these ideas into practice back home. At the same time, in this period, you see the influence of socialism and of sort of class-based political identifications in the region, but also Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, Garveyism, so political identities or communities that are formed on the basis of conceptions of ethnicity. And I'm also interested in how these two sort of converged and then influenced both conceptions of solidarity, but also these networks at large. And finally, I'm also particularly interested in locating the Dutch Caribbean in this region because in historical studies of radical traditions and of socialist discourse in general, the Dutch Caribbean have been sort of neglected, even though radical activities definitely did take place there. So in order to carry this off, I'm actually toggling between 2 analytical scales. And the first of these 2 scales is the biography or study of life trajectories. So I'm following the lives of different specific radical actors around the islands that are my sort of geographical starting point. And I'm applying sort of classical historical methods to trace out how they conceptualize solidarity. And then I'm also studying wider transatlantic discourse using digital tools and distant reading. And by comparing how these individuals interacted with this sort of wider discourse and employed certain conceptions that circulated more broadly, but also influenced global discourse, I hope to also toggle between the two layers and see how these individuals were located in wider networks. And for the case study of Curacao, I am looking specifically at 3 actors that form sort of my starting point here. And these are 3 actors that actually have also quite a different, they're all radicals, political figures that also explicitly use the concept of solidarity. But there are big differences between these 3 figures as well in terms of their social positions. So Felipe, or as he was known, Felix Chacuto, was a dock worker, sort of a working class activist that traveled to New York to work there and was involved in labor unionism. Daniel de Leon is an intellectual, sort of a Jewish intellectual that grew up on Curacao but left for America and was influential also in socialist parties there. And Medardo de Marchena was a Curaçaoan sort of middle-class activist that was really into anti-colonial thought, was really influenced by Marcus Garvey, Pan-Africanist idea, but also socialist ideas from Harlem, and was later on also important political advisor on the Caribbean island of Bonaire. And all 3 have sort of been neglected in scholarly discourse as Curaçaoan radicals. So work has been written about De Leon, but mostly as an American socialist. And Medardo de Marchena and Felipe Chacuto have only recently been given more attention on the island of Curaçao itself. But in historical discourse at large, they have still been sort of neglected as important radical figures. But when actually interpreting their lives and their conceptions of solidarity and also their work and practices of solidarity against the sort of wider global context, this story changes and it becomes really hard to actually ignore their contribution to these wider networks any longer. And this is where the second scale comes in, which is sort of the distant reading part and the digital historical analysis. So I've been collecting hundreds of different periodicals, socialist and Pan-Africanist periodicals that were circulated across the regions I'm studying. And I've traced sort of the different uses of solidarity in these periodicals and labeled them according to the signifiers used by the actors in the periodicals themselves that they use to define solidarity between which groups actually. And these labels have been added to this visualization, and by tracing, as you can see through by this line there, this thread, by tracing sort of the lives and how these cross through different discourses of solidarity, it becomes possible to compare how their individual solidarities both took from these locally circulating conceptions, but also influenced the conceptions of solidarity across these different regions. And doing so actually shows that Curaçaoan radicals actively partook in global networks. So as this picture also shows, this line is based on the travels of Chacuto. He went from Curacao to Cuba and from Cuba to New York and then came back to Curacao, and he took all sorts of ideas that he's that were formulated in these regions with him and formulated solidarities that were focused on transcending nations and on working class identification as a result. But they also, in this sense, they borrowed from other regions, but they also reconfigured these conceptions and practices to their specific contexts. So there was a sort of a strategic use there as well. So Chacuto, for instance, put this call for solidarity to use when calling for better working conditions for Curaçaoan laborers. And by asking for support and pressure from other socialist groups, he managed to actually get this done. At the same time, they also these new conceptions sparked new ideas and actions in sort of unforeseen places as well. So for instance, Dutch radical socialists, such as Ferdinand Domela Nieuwenhuis, responded to the Curaçaoan strikes led by Chacuto and conceptualize solidarity as something that should always include anti-colonial activities as well. So you can see there that there was this sort of negotiation around solidarity that comes to the fore if you sort of zoom out and take these entangled trajectories into account. At the same time, there's also this this issue of the limits that they encountered, because Chikuto didn't necessarily rely on Pan-African notions of solidarity, because he was actively working on sort of getting higher wages out there. And for these specific uses, activists in the Caribbean sometimes mobilized different types of solidarity. So under certain circumstances, they might stress this working class identification, but in other circumstances, they might stress sort of Black emancipation across the world. So it's also important to think of these solidarities as always strategic and very contextual. And by doing this kind of research, it becomes possible to actually assert that there was definitely an existence of influential radicalism in the Dutch Caribbean, specifically on Curacao, and that the Dutch Caribbean were an active and important part of global radical exchanges that also influenced Europe, even though historical discourse about socialism in Europe doesn't always necessarily acknowledge this. And finally, it is important to think of solidarity as a flexible and adaptable framework that can be used and adapted according to contexts and leads to political action in a wide variety of contexts there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for that excellent presentation. I am looking to see whether we have any questions in the chat. We don't just yet, so I would go ahead and ask one of my own. In terms of, are you suggesting that based on your focus on the Dutch Caribbean, you mentioned Cuba and Trinidad? So are you suggesting that those cases of solidarity could have been transferable to the radical movements that emerged in Cuba and Trinidad?
Yes, well, I still need to look at the sources in Cuba and Trinidad. So it's of course at this point hard to make any really big claims about that. But there is definitely this link between Curacao and these two islands, and you see that, for instance, labor migration also influences the transfer of these conceptions. So Cuban workers, for instance, at some point, sort of radical Cuban workers, anti-colonial workers, become persecuted, and some of them flee to Curacao and then also bring these ideas with them. So I think these islands are definitely intricately connected in not only in terms of trade and migration, but also in sort of sharing these and circulating these political ideas.
Okay, thank you. And I do have to ask as well, are you just looking at Trinidad or Trinidad and Tobago? Because I think you would already be aware of Tobago's Dutch history,
yes.
which is not the case for Trinidad. So that's why I asked if you're looking at both, or is it that you are just looking at Trinidad?
Yes, I am at this point thinking about looking solely at Trinidad, and that has to do with the fact that the differences between those two regions also make it almost sort of two case studies, because sort of the conditions on Trinidad also sort of resulted in the fact that some radical Caribbean activists were educated, for instance, in London and got ideas there from specifically English circles and brought these back, which led to different solidarities, for instance, then in sort of Tobago and other Dutch-speaking regions, which had different connections with the Netherlands. So just to get sort of also three regions with different links to both European and American countries there, I'm focusing mostly on the English-speaking part of the island. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Quincy Gario, great to see you, albeit virtually, Quincy. He says, thank you for your presentation. Could you tell us a bit about your own positioning towards this research? How do you relate to this research?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, what I find interesting about these networks and the fact that they were so sort of important for the formulation of radical ideas and practices is that they also cross all these national borders, but at the same time are very much shaped by differences and power relations. And I think this also very much applies to social movements today that operate very internationally, but at the same time have to deal with the fact that there are still power balances that they might not even be aware of always themselves. And since I'm also very much interested in thinking about how to set up or organize political movements in sort of successful ways, I think it's an important and crucial question to reflect on how this went in the past, and which also what kind of things went wrong. So when, for instance, some solidarities were formulated but didn't get a response, and sometimes Caribbean radicals weren't taken seriously in Europe. And so I'm also interested in understanding what sort of led to these tensions, and how we can actually think about doing a better job basically today. And this is also something that is of personal interest to me.
Thank you so much once again. And with that, we take you back to the studio.
Yes, glad to be back in the studio. Thank you so much to our oral presenters, Saran Stewart and Thomas van Gaalen. We're going to move on to the poster pitches of today. You see how we build that up? We went from 0 to 1 to 2, and today we have 3 poster pitches ready for you. As you know, the poster pitchers will be having 1 minute to pitch their poster, and you, on your side of the laptop, you can vote for your favorite poster. You can do that on the DCRW platform. There you press on posters, and with your favorite poster, you press on the little heart, and when you've done so, you voted for your favorite poster. On Friday, Friday is tomorrow, there will be poster sessions. The poster sessions are in Gather. Gather is our other platform. It's like an old school video game where you can walk around, interact with each other, chat with each other, ask questions, and keep the discussion alive. So during breaks or after all the keynote speakers and the oral presentations, when the day is over, visit Gather to just wander around and have a little chit chat with each other. But before you do that, we're gonna go to the poster pitches. The poster pitchers, they only have 1 minute, 60 seconds exact to do their pitch. And I will introduce them, have a little countdown, and after the countdown, it's time to start. The pitchers of today are Liesje Provoyer, Yolanda Richardson, and Carole Terrien. I hope that I'm pronouncing the names correctly. If I'm not, my sincere apologies. Let's start with the first poster pitcher, and that is Liesje Provoyer. Are you there, Liesje?
Hello, hello. Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Are you ready for your poster pitch?
Definitely.
Are you nervous, or is it?
I've been jumping around for the past 10 minutes to get rid of some nerves, but I'm ready.
I can tell your energy sparks all the way through the screen. So hopefully you'll do a great job. As I said, you'll get a 5-second countdown and then the clock will start. Let's bring the clock into the screen. There we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Set goals for yourself, inspire others to do so, and create potential. My name is Liesje Provoyer, and recently I've conducted research on the motivation of students in a Dutch Caribbean island using mixed methods approach. I measured the type of academic motivation of vocational students, and this was measured using questionnaires inspired by the self-determination theory by Dacey and Brian. Furthermore, I explored how the cultural context that these students are in influence their motivation. This was done using interviews inspired by the developmental niche framework by Harkness and Super, where different settings, customs, and beliefs were explored. If you're interested in the contextual aspects that influence this motivation of vocational students in the Dutch Caribbean and what we can do to boost intrinsic motivation, visit my poster in the gallery tab. Thank you.
Wow, that was perfectly timed. Now you can breathe and relax.
Yes.
I see a lot of hands coming up. Well, that is really nice. Drink some water and thank you. And please stay for the rest of the poster pitch sessions, of course.
Do.
It's
Good
time
luck.
for
the
pitch. It is time for the pitch of Yolanda Richardson. Come closer. Hello, Yolanda.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I haven't been jumping around like Licia, but I'm also a bit nervous.
You are a bit nervous. You look very, very calm and relaxed. So hopefully you can bring that forth in your pitch. So are you ready for the 5-second countdown?
Yes, I am.
Okay, bring in the clock. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Have you ever wondered about those who migrated to Aruba and Curacao during the heydays of the oil refineries from Sabre Station and St. Martin? If yes, join me on Friday to hear about my research on how Dutch Caribbean English-speaking migrants and their descendants self-identify and how they navigate possible multiple loyalties during the electoral process. Hi, I'm Yolanda Richardson, an English-speaking, proud Dutch Caribbean, Aruban-born. This research is relevant because studies centering the life experiences of these migrants are scarce. This research is an interdisciplinary qualitative study that will combine archival research with oral history and theories on voting behavior. Additionally, I will do 20 interviews. These are going to be conducted on Aruba and Curacao, and I will focus on 4 politicians who are English-speaking, have an English-speaking background. If you're interested, join
me. Thank you very much. So were you looking at a little note or do you have your own clock there? Because I saw you looking up. Is it like some notes to make sure that you're on the right path?
No, I was looking at the clock.
You were looking at the clock. Wow, perfectly timed. Thank you very much. And good luck with your research because I heard you're still conducting it, right?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Good luck. I know how it feels, so good luck. And sorry?
I'm going to do field work in a while, I hope.
Field work, I know it's going to be heavy, but you know the results will be glorious when you put that final dot on your research paper. So go for it.
Thank you.
Have a great day. And the third poster picture of today will be Carol Terin.
Good morning, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes.
So is your last name Terin or Terrien? I'm just wondering.
It's Terrien.
Terrien. So the first time I pronounced it was correct. Nice. Are you nervous too? Are you jumping around or are you more the relaxed type?
I've been listening to the presentations all morning, so I'm a bit saturated with the information, and now being a good PhD candidate and now questioning everything I've collected. So there's some really interesting matters that even during the pitches, I thought, oh, I should have talked about motivation. I should have talked about other things. And so anyways, it's all very useful. It's been a fabulous conference to date.
Nice, that's good to hear. And never doubt yourself. I'm curious to know what you have spoken about. If you haven't spoken about other things that we've heard today, you'll find a different angle. So are you ready for your 5-second countdown?
Yes, I am.
There we go. Put the clock. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, everybody. And my name is Carol Terrien, and I'm at Carleton University in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And my poster is the preliminary results of some of my studies in disaster anthropology in St. Martin. In particular, looking at the long-term cultural impacts and the role that women have in long-term disaster recovery. So this is an anthropological empirical study. There's been a real dearth and an absence of research in the Caribbean around disaster anthropology and the long-term impacts, the cultural changes that disasters come. So I've been focusing on St. Martin, particularly since Irma 2017, up until now, even with the COVID impacts. So I'm doing qualitative research. It's about halfway done. I probably have a couple of months of field work to do. So I hope you can come to my poster and we can talk about what we found out, which is actually quite fascinating.
So you leave us with a cliffhanger, which is actually quite fascinating. That is a good extra addition. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who just did their poster pitch. Liesje Provoyer, Yolanda Richardson, and Carole Terrien.
Friends right, trying to holler at me. I don't want no friend. This girl be the guy that can't get no love from.
For the next two oral presenters, they are ready. I can see them. So we're gonna have Gregory Richardson and Ange Jessurun. Gregory Richardson is Instituto Pedagógico Arubano. As I said, I'm not fluent in the language, so excuse me for mispronouncing any words. The title is Musical Expression and Interpretation of Environmental Challenges in the Dutch Caribbean. And Ange Jessurun will talk from Foundation Arte de Palabra, title Fire Lobby, 200 Years Fiery Love in the Diaspora, a Search for Identity. And I see that Geneva Phillips-Durham is also there. Of course, she is our content moderator. So after the talks of Gregory and Ange, she will have the Q&A sessions. So Gregory Richardson, come forward in the Zoom, please.
Morning, good afternoon.
Hello, how are you?
Doing fine.
Nice. I see an interesting background. I cannot really see it because I'm a little bit too far away. Can you explain your background to us?
It's basically a picture of artwork of a carnival celebration, which is then the Juve morning, which takes place in the, let's say, in the wee hours of the morning, in which people actually participate or dance in the streets throughout the entire Caribbean. And this one, in this case, this is one that takes place in Aruba in the city of San Nicolas.
Nice, Juve morning. I know about it from my younger years, so good picture. Are you ready for your oral presentation?
Okay, so music and climate challenges on the ABC or SSS ABC Islands. For context, this research is part of the Islanders at the Helm project, which is a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary study of climate change on the SSS ABC Islands. And my role in this research is I am a postdoc. And in this research is very interesting as well, this project, as we have a multiple perspectives looking at climate change, which includes cultural anthropology, archaeology, ethnobotany, architecture, policymaking, and visual arts and anthropology, and more. Climate challenges on the SSS ABC Islands includes coastal erosion, rising sea levels, extreme heat, drought, frequency of hurricanes, flooding, excessive tourism, and the like. Now, the perspectives on climate effects on the SSS ABC Islands from, let's say, a top-down Northern University scientific approach would be that the islands or the people of the islands are very limited in their knowledge regarding climate challenges. This is specifically related to, for example, sustainable development goals, such as climate action, life below water, life on land, etc. But if one looks a bit closer, we realize, though, that there's so much more knowledge that exists, tangible knowledge from the perspective of the individuals living on the islands. Perhaps maybe they can, some of them do not verbalize this from a specific scientific jargon, but from the lived experience, we can learn a lot. So what can we learn about climate challenges through música de carnaval, through carnival music? So, as mentioned already, a multidisciplinary approach gives us a better understanding of the lived experience of the SSS ABC Islanders as it relates to climate change and its effects in the broadest sense. More profoundly, on how through artistic expressions these climate experiences are given meaning. So we look at the reflexive ethnographic approach, specifically as it relates to the methodological approaches to this research. So J. Ruby talks about reflexive as it insists that anthropologists systematically and rigorously reveal their methodology and themselves as an instrument of data generation. Davies writes that reflexivity is a process of self-reference, the ways in which the products of research are affected by the personal and the process of doing research. So in that process, we also look at the researcher themselves, the role of the researcher in the process of data collecting, as the critique would be, or the challenge would be often that much of the scientific approach, at least to climate studies, have been done from one particular angle, and hence the encouragement, hence the reason why it's important that there are multiple angles taken, and also the role of the researcher in the process as well. So, for example, in the ontological turn in anthropology, we look at how this type of research encourages us to challenge ourselves to look at the world from a perspective of the locals. That is, to let the empirical findings, in a sense, guide the process. So what does, for example, popular musical expressions during Carnival, such as the tumba, calypso, soca, road march, road fire, actually tell us about climate challenges in climate catastrophe, for example, in our region? Now, for background context, it's important to know that the general narrative regarding música de carnaval, this popular carnival music, would be seen as frivolous. So in Papiamento, a quote would be, música de carnaval no tem mucho sentido, tá pa bacanalzo. So basically, it's only for party, and it doesn't have much sense. So what does carnival music tell us about climate change? So much of we can reference, for example, Gibault, Dawson, Smith, in the way that Calypso, for example, has been presented in the literature. So, for example, the general discourse on the factions in the Caribbean region criticizing these types of songs have suggested soca and the like to simply be but a sub-strand of Calypso, and just like pop music having a focus only on party and drinking and little else. Furthermore, Gibault talks about, since the 1990s, the commercial value of soca has been widely recognized. Soca's social, cultural, and musical accomplishments, however, remained contentious and contested. Soca's so-called light lyrics and its emphasis on sexualized bodies and pleasures associated in particular with the 1990s onwards have contributed to its dismissal by many. Judged against Calypso's socio-political commentaries, soca has been criticized by numerous journalists, academics, Calypsonians, politicians, and listeners for not engaging the political. And this can be, in many ways, also applied to the other musical genres such as tumba. So, seen as frivolous, no content, and only used for partying. But at the center of this study, we actually look at how does this type of music, música de carnaval, engage with themes related to climate? What do the lyrics say? How is it vocalized, the sound, the sonic? How is the public engaged? What does it do or not do? How does it feel? How does it dance, or how do we dance? What themes are addressed? How is it inspired? How is it created? So important to look at, for example, in the work of Barthes and others, we see that jouissance, forms of bliss, pleasure, what we would call breakaway, jump and wave, bochincha as a means of deconstruction and knowing. We also can see it as a form of learning, also as a form of debate. So we see, for example, music as the breakaway through, let's say, the jouissance in the music as a way of knowing. And what does it say? For example, Barthes talks about jouissance being indescribable in words. In other words, as being in a state where all barriers, classics, exclusion, syncretism do not exist, a space where one accepts every charge of illogicality, incongruity, and where one remains passive in the face of Socratic irony. In reference to the body, for example, we even go further, and this is what Dana Mills talks about. Hence, dance and politics are always already intertwined. So dancing bodies affect bodies in the audience. All of those bodies are political entities. Understanding dance as including linguistic and communicative features within it as being part of a whole allows the study to expand into understanding issues and ideas articulated through moving bodies. So we see jouissance, pleasure as a form of knowing and also deconstructing dominant discourses, and also dance during Música de Carnaval also as a form of the political. So some of the early documentation of this study. We see much of the work done on, let's say, themes related to climate challenges or climate themes can be found in the traditional Fiesta de Cosecha celebration, so the harvest celebration. So you can think of the Simadan, the Seu, the Ragai, and also the traditions of Tambu, which is more related to year-end festivals. You also see these approaches, I would say the We Shall Overcome, We Are the World, Live Aid approaches after, for example, a climate catastrophe, such as, in this case, Statia Artists United came together and they performed, or they created a song called The Eye of the Storm, in which it was a sort of an uplifting consciousness about, okay, we shall overcome this disaster, sort of encouragement. But when we look at, for example, some of these examples within the space of carnival music, I present three samples. More work, of course, needs to be done, but interviews have been done with the writers of these songs, the composers, and we do a sort of an analysis. Just a snippet of how the first song is. This is a soca song from St. Martin, performed by Rolling Stones in 1996, after Hurricane Louis in 1995.
Storm coming, all you just grab bags and compass. Grab those macaroons. Get those fires. Those tins of sardines. And those pork wings.
Warning, hurricane coming. Warning on the radio, a storm approaching. Later in the evening, wind start blowing. House roof, dog roof, every damn thing flying. I see the roof in the sky. Lord, I start to cry. Hiding under the bed.
We're going to go over to the second one.
Big start.
Ay, Sahara, gota inmenso, con desierto di misterio, un secreto, la bota forma tormenta tropical, usurai que nos del Caribe arriba vos, a bota hora pavo derechacos, en carnaval, catilla básico, forma lluvia di catuna, manda viento de tacachu, peto pacula más una sati.
Last one.
Raid on wet in the night and day. See them jumping up in Juve. Look the carnival wash away. So I rushing under me neighbor bed. All I do was hold me head. I asked the minister for a guide. Cause we got no place to run, no place to hide. Yeah. I asked the minister for a guide. High up in the sky. What you want to buy? Way up in the sky. When your hands up high up in the sky. Oh my gosh. Run, you better run. You better run. Hold up.
That was the last one. I'll give an explanation of the songs now. Okay, so the first one is from, as I mentioned, Rolling Stones from St. Martin. And the artists are actually singing, who loot, raise up your hand, who loot. This is in response to, let's say, the looting that took place after Hurricane Louis, let's say as a form of, let's say, a disaster response or traumatic response. And they actually took a song and they made a soca song that became a very popular hit during the next year's carnival. So from catastrophe and from seemingly, let's say, a troublesome occurrence, they make a song and also has everyone participating. So grab those macaroons, he says, grab those tires, those tins of sardines. Warning, warning, hurricane coming. Warning on the radio, a storm is lurking. Later in the evening, wind start blowing. House roof, dog roof, every damn thing flying. I see a roof in the sky. Lord, I start to cry. Hiding under my bed, thought I was dead. Things start, high wind blowing, was only passing, the sky was dirty. And then he asks the crowd, who loot? Raise up your hand who loot. And then he also says, bring those Timberlands, my underwear extra large, my shoe size 10. Bring me a crowbar, a nail and hammer. And don't forget the bread and butter, etc. The second song that I presented was a song from Ange Jessurun, a former Tumba king. And this was his song last year. It's called Boletim de Última Hora. And it's in Papiamento. And he's basically talking about how, let's say, there's a hurricane that is coming to Curacao that has the Caribbean upside down. And but if we go into the center of the hurricane, we can find peace, and we can enjoy our carnival within the Ewowo, so the eye of the hurricane. So he says, Sahara bota imenso, bo desierto tem mistério e secreto. Ta abota forma tormenta tropical, kutur anya den Caribe tem nos bocabão. A outra hora para nos drecha cos, carnaval ta hora para nos hasi bom. Forma nubia de catuna, laga bienta direnta cacho, e por bai bula te turna satin. So, he's talking about where the hurricanes originate from. So from West Africa, he talks about the Sahara, and they incorporate that in the song. So there's a dance that is accompanied as well, etc., etc. And the last one is a band from Aruba called the NBO band. And there was a tropical, let's say, a tropical storm, or the effects of a tropical storm in 2005, Hurricane Ivan. And in this one, as you know, on the ABC Islands, we don't experience many hurricanes, but this time it had its effect. And this was a critique actually on the government, why there were no shelters in place in which they received lots of flooding. So he talks about, he made a song basically. So NBO, they made a song about run for shelter, and it became a very popular hit during Carnival, in which people actually danced with their hands in the air, running for shelter. So he says, rain coming down, what do people say? With a shelter. See them jumping up in Juve with a shelter. So I rush up all under my neighbor bed. Can't find the shelter. I ask the minister for a guide. Can't find the shelter because we have no place to run, no place to hide. And then he says, raindrops is falling on my head, form a roof, form a roof. So you have that participation as well. So in closing, or close to closing, so some of the observations until now. So the major themes that we see are hurricanes, let's say dominant in Carnival themes, specific dance moves, topical current themes of the day, political themes, in which actually they compare, for example, politicians to hurricane, types of hurricanes. So let's say politicians that have caused enormous disaster would be a Hurricane 5. So incorporation of storm names referring to person or personalities, for example, and also tied to gender and so forth. And so you see these topics will appear as sub-themes. Concluding and reflection, so concluding questions to reflect on, and a methodological practice. So how do we go about doing research in the Caribbean? So for example, our positionality. For example, the fact that you were born in the Caribbean, does that make you more knowledgeable about the matter or not? So we have to constantly be questioning these matters in a reflexive way. What does actually mean in the context of your work? Do we reflect critically enough on our own work? What can these types of research approaches teach us? And specifically when it comes to climate challenges. And I would even say in addition, when I sent in this proposal for the abstract for presentation, I sent it in actually as to be presented in the theme of the climate theme, and not culture and identity. So I think there's a lot we can learn from actually if we do the, let's say we are more interdisciplinary in our approaches. So are we listening, or are we just describing, etc.? So conclude, I want to finish with a quote from Earl Lovelace in the Dragon Can Dance, Trinidadian an author. And it invites us actually to reflect on, let's say, at least as I make the link between Música de Carnaval, so carnival music, and the way the people of the SSS ABC Islands actually traditionally or historically have engaged with climate themes. So perhaps maybe not in a scientific way, but actually they are very much present. And this quote goes like this. He says, "There's dancing in the calypso, dance. If the words mourn the death of a neighbor, the music insists that you dance. If it tells the troubles of a brother, the music says to dance. Dance to hurt. Dance. If you're catching hell, dance. And if the government don't care, dance. Dance, dance, dance. It is in the dancing that you ward off the devil. Dancing is a chant that cuts off the power from the devil." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for your exceptional presentation. And as you know, as an honorary Trinbagonian, you know that by Calypso, our stories are told. So, you know, anything can be happening and we jamming still. So,
yes, the city could burn down.
I just, yes, that's right. So I think it's really an interesting interpretation of how we can look at climate change in relation to our own understanding of it, being from the Caribbean and experiencing climatic events in the Caribbean. And earlier on, Quincy Gario actually spoke to the question of positionality in relation to what you share there, positioning towards the research and how relatable it is. And I think for us, because as a region, climatic events, they don't just have an impact in the SSS ABC Islands, it's throughout the region. So for me, I feel that that positionality is extremely important for us all to have a better appreciation of how we understand our own lived realities and the ownership of the research and thinking about practical solutions and how we respond to issues like that. So I just wanted to get your sense of, since there are no questions thus far in the chat, in terms of the perspective of locals, how has the interaction been with them, with you drawing these analogies? Because yes, we're in the streets, we're partying, we're up for Juve, we're having a good time, we know all the dances, but are they linking it? Have you found that they're linking it and understanding that you are simultaneously learning about climate change and climatic events that do have very real implications for our sustainability and sustenance?
Okay, that's a very, very good observation. So I'm still in the process of this particular research, but I can draw on, let's say, the data that I have from other research that I've done on jouissance, pleasure, and critique. And so what you see though is that yeah, when people create, so I've spoken to the authors of the composers of these songs, when people create, they're not thinking, it really depends. So in the song of NBO Run for Shelter, even though it's a soca song, the composer was actually very conscious about, as a form of critique on government for not being prepared for a, let's say, a catastrophe, a natural disaster. And then he incorporated that in the song. But there's, in another case, for example, the tumbero, so the one who wrote the song on the category 5 hurricane and the tumba in Curacao, etc. He used it more as a form of fantasy, a creation, a recreation of, let's say, what it would mean to, let's say, he takes a natural phenomenon and he incorporates that with carnival, etc. Maybe with all the craziness, all the bacchanal, there's still some level of peace within the madness. But if you ask them particularly, did I write the song to make people conscious of the climate challenges? It really, really depends. It really depends, or when people perform. So, but there's a lot that we can draw from, also from the non-verbal. And I think perhaps maybe we should explore some more in that area as well.
Thank you so much.
I see some, I think
from Quincy Gario.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. Can you also reflect on the critique? Sorry, I lost that. Are you still right? Okay. Can you also reflect on the critique on the commissioners and their hotel rooms? That reminds me of the case around the Royal House visiting St. Martin after Irma and people being kicked out of Great Bay Hotel for their stay. Can you tell us a bit more about historic connections between reflections on past climatic events?
Okay, well, I can't go too much into detail, but I'm assuming that you're referring to the role of, for example, let's say the Dutch, the European Dutch coming to, let's say, after, or their response after natural disasters and so forth, and in particular, let's say, privileged roles, or at least the way that they are being protected, or they are they stay in particular spaces. I think Quincy is referring to that, in hotels where actually they themselves actually don't actually receive the brunt of the damage, versus they're in their position. Now, some of these, what I can say about it is, at least I know that in many of the traditions, I did not select any calypsos here, but in the calypsos, they have referred to this and have shared their critique on what happened and how this takes place. In the Hulut from Rolling Stones, the performer also makes mention of one of these cases in which they, I did not quote it I did not present it, but they also mentioned that. But just to go back to what Quincy talks about, yes, I think these issues are definitely addressed in song, especially in the calypso, but also in the soca. And of course, this is something that, as this research is ongoing, it's something that I also need to do some more work on as well. But thanks for the question, and it's something I can follow up on.
Thank you so much, Gregory. And we now go to Ange Jessurun of the Foundation Art de Palabra. The presentation is on Fire Lobby, 200 Years Fiery Love in the Diaspora, a Search for Identity. So over to you, Fire. Angie, sorry.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
So I'm going to share with you my search for my identity and family roots, which I put down in a novel, Fire Lobby. The contents I want to share with you today. What do I want to know? How can I get to know it? What are my findings? What were my challenges? And what do I recommend? I had two triggers. First of all, at the secondary school, someone called me Surinamese, and my mother is from Curacao. I'm born in Curacao. My father is from Suriname. So it was a shock for me to be called Surinamese, and I asked her why. Then she told me I wasn't speaking Papiamento. Then I realized that in order to be part of a culture, the language is very, very important. Secondly, my aunt, my father's sister, they are both from Suriname. She kept telling us about their grandfather, my great-grandfather, who traveled from Hong Kong to Suriname. in 1865 to work there on the plantation. He changed his name on the boat out of fear for Black people. I kept thinking about that, knowing that he married a Black woman later. It triggered me very much to write down that story. That is, so my research questions were more like, what are my roots? Where do I belong to? What is my family ancestry, my identity, and my belonging? These are, this is my great-grandfather. He changed his name from Achak to Yongbao, and his wife, Emilia Olmtak. Very interesting also because from her, we have the manumission. That means that she was a slave, enslaved, and together with 6 other family members, she got brought to liberty in 1859, which was presented in the government in the Suriname paper. Okay. Then what I searched for cultural and artistic aspects of identity mostly. I already mentioned the language, religion, also educational development, professional development, spirituality. Those all are things I studied. I want to share with you a small anecdote, but this is my brother. We have the same ancestry. We have the same parents, and still he took up the Chinese culture. He married to a Chinese. He built a Chinese house in Curacao, just to see how the cultural aspect lives on. I had also the societal aspects of identity and belonging, where the names are very important. Name changes play an important role in my book. Nationality, of course, place of birth. Migration, the migration and acculturation, very important, and what happens after that. After my mother's death, there was a school named after her in a new neighborhood, a folk neighborhood, and then we got to know about what she meant for the society. When they named the school after her, they put it all for us on paper, and we were young, so we didn't know what my mother was doing for the society. So my methodology, so for the identity research, I did a lot of, I read a lot of books, I did desktop research, the archive research. I want to say that several family members gathered that information for me. I didn't ask them, but they did it, and I got it, and I could use it for the book. What I did a lot is interviewing older family members. I read some books, newspapers, especially old newspapers published on Delpher. I listened to recordings, for example, a 3-hour interview someone did with my father. And letters play an important role. I got hold of some letters. I will show you. And the online databases of Suriname in 2020 and now also in Curacao helped me a lot with the information I needed. These are 2 of the books I used. My uncle, Richard Simon, he compiled 2 books about the history of his family and in Curacao and of the neighborhood, Coraalspert, which is a big neighborhood in Curacao. So I'm very grateful for that. Like I told you, I got information and also letters. My father wrote his history, wrote down his history for us, and some parts of the love letters he and my mother wrote each other when he went to Suriname to see if my mother really was the one he wanted to be with. This is an example of the database in Suriname of 2020. When I filled in the name of Emilia, my great-grandmother, and her mother, Azetta, I got really a very useful information about her dates of birth and when was she bought into that plantation, and also who was the owner, and the plantation, the name of the plantation, Klein Charlottenburg, which I didn't know before. What are my findings? So I put all the findings in the novel, Via Lobby, 200 Years Fierly Love in the Diaspora, which was published in November 2022 in Dutch. I hope the Papiamento version will be ready by the end of this year, and I wish to publish one in English. You have here information about the publisher and okay. So I got understanding of my roots, my family genealogy, parentals, and that all of that helped me to understand who I am. This is an example of the of a family tree, the part of my father's family. Here, I don't know if you see it, but the last line, these are me and my brothers and sisters. And the 8th generation, that's my parents. The 7th is my grandparents. And then the grandparents, the ancestors of my grandmother, those are the Chinese and the African. And of the part of my grandfather, Jessurun, that is a very, very large family tree from the with Jewish origins up all the way to Portugal. Okay, some of my challenges were the oral history, written history traditions, and the fact that some in the family, some people died before I could interview them. I had a lot of information about the European and Jewish ancestry, but the challenges for African and Asian descendants, those are difficult to find. And okay, what do I recommend? I recommend to start collecting every information about your family, even if you yourselves are not planning to do something with it. Maybe your grandchild will, and do the interviews with the oldest parts of the family who are still live. Put in the articles, everything you can gather them, visit the archives, collect stories, memories, pictures, put the names and the date on the pictures. You will need them once. And digitalize all this information, share it with family members. Do not wait, start now. So I got to know that I am of mixed ethnicity. I'm a descendant of Asian, African, European ancestors. I'm a Curaçaoan with Surinamese roots. I'm a proud Judy Corso. Thank you very much. Masha danki.
Thank you so much for that insightful presentation. And I'm seeing a number of rounds of applause in the chat, a number of thumbs up, reactions, sorry. So I think that many of our attendees would agree with much of what you've shared. And we all do wish in some shape or form that we could trace our lineage and our heritage in this way. Let me just go to the chat to see whether we have any questions so far. We don't, so I will go ahead and ask one of my own. Angie, what would be the most insightful aspect of this for you going through this journey and this process of tracing your lineage? What was the most interesting or rewarding part of it for you?
I can say the reception it got. At first, before the book was published, I was a bit, afraid of the reactions, because it's like you give something which is intimate, something of the family, you share it. But I can say that I had a very, very good reaction. I was in the Netherlands in May and June. I had some 8 presentations, and we are going now to the 4th edition of the book. I will visit Aruba next month, and Suriname in July, in August. So that's yeah, I didn't know beforehand that it would have such an impact, but I realized that being part of the Caribbean, most of us don't know all of our roots. We are mixed, and because of the migration, you get things get lost. And I realized that I was very lucky to have of both parts of my parents histories that were recorded and that go very, very far. I didn't show you, but the part of my mother, she's from Coral Specht, that she's a descendant of the first Specht who came from Brazil to Curacao to start the plantation. And that was in 1660. So when you realize that you are a mix of plantation owners and enslaved, it's a very emotional process. I cried a lot, I can tell you that.
Thank you so much. And Quincy Gario has a question. He says, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering on your reflection on Angela's presentation earlier, in which she looked at the contemporary use of the Yudi Korsu identity to erase anti-Black racism on the island.
I don't know if I understand the question. Can you?
Quincy, do you want
I was
to?
wondering on your reflection on Angela's presentation. I think it's, I don't get the
I
question.
guess he's asking for your feedback. I'm not sure if you were, if you had joined us at the time of Angela Roe's presentation.
Oh, Angela Roe, okay. I thought because they call me Angela too.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, I didn't join then, but I can say that it's a very crucial time for us. We struggle with these heritage, with the heritage of the slavery, and the way our society is right now. So every single thing can help to fight this, to get us to be more equal and to get a more just society. Yes, I think that's why the book is so being received so good also.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again for your presentation, and I look forward to seeing the Papimento as well as English versions of it. And Yolanda is saying, bring books to sell. I think Yolanda is based in Aruba. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Albertha Joseph Alexander. How are you doing today?
Great.
Nice. Are you excited for the workshop?
Indeed.
Is it going to be interactive? Do we need to jump and walk around? Or can we just sit back, relax, and just soak up all the information that you have to offer?
You could do that with a pen, pencil, and paper in hand.
Okay, so make sure that everybody who's already in the Zoom, you'll still have, let's say 30 seconds to run and grab some paper and a pen and a pencil, or you can choose between a pen and pencil, but make sure you have something to write on and write with, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yes. Are you ready to start your workshop?
Yes, as soon as they get their pen or pencil or paper or tablet, however they choose.
Oh, a tablet is obligated as well. So a tablet, a paper, a pen, anything that you can get your hands on, at least to write some notes. Because there is going to be a pop quiz at the end of this workshop.
Oh my.
No, that was a joke. I thought you were going to have a pop quiz so people can just make quick notes so they answer all the questions correctly. But if you're ready, the stage is yours. And take the stage, Doctor, and start your workshop.
Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I am Dr. Albertha Joseph Alexander, and I'm joining you from Trinidad and Tobago, the Twin Island Republic in the Caribbean. I specifically live on the island of Trinidad and Tobago, and well, at the island of Trinidad in the north of Trinidad, but I was born in the south of Trinidad, so that covers it in that regard. One of the things I particularly was excited about was the fact that today's theme is culture and identity. And when I looked at culture and identity, I saw one of the in that list was or is creative industries. And I am a supporter of the creative industry. I myself will consider myself to be a creative because among the many things, one of the things I'm presently doing is producing a film, and you can't get more creative than that in terms of being part of the creative industry. So there's the creative side of me as a storyteller, and there's also the creative side of me as a scientist researcher. Why I say that? Because as a scientist or researcher, you are creating new information, producing new information, finding out new information for persons. So one of the even more wonderful things I would say is that I've been able to bring the storytelling side of me and the science researcher side of me, just bring them together, whoops, and put all of that under the umbrella of science communication. So now I get to do those two. And one of the things about science communication is, especially for researchers, those working with researchers, our researchers, is that science communication is an important vehicle where you are able to translate and transform your work so that it can be more accessible to a wider cadre of persons and people and audiences. And science communication can come in a number of ways. And we saw one of those ways on the first day of the Dutch Research Week. On June 26th, there was a workshop on science storytelling, which I also attended. And the person presenting that workshop is a journalist. So that's one aspect of science communication in terms of being a journalist. And then I'm now following on that path and bridging it today by looking at science communication for researchers in the space of social media outreach. And science storytelling on June the 26th and social media outreach on June the 29th. So to bridge those two gaps, you could say, or those two pillars, I wrote a summary of some aspects of the workshop for today. And if persons are able to go to that summary, which is on the platform, that would be great. But nevertheless, I will touch on it as I go through the workshop today and as we engage with one another. At this point, I should mention that for me, I am particularly passionate about seeing research communicated, research from the Caribbean communicated. And I think this is a nice juncture to when I was doing a little research and reading up, I found this wonderful quote that came out from, see if I could bring it up, that came out from a report when the Dutch Caribbean Research Week started back in 2014. And excuse if I pronounce the name wrong, but Glenn said, the community has a right to choices based on science. And furthermore, what was also mentioned in that report is that Dutch universities did not have enough prior knowledge to set up a study in a way that sufficiently took into account the knowledge landscape of the Caribbean part of the Netherlands. And that Caribbean part that looks different, it works differently and therefore requires a different version. So, and I think that that was a connection there because research coming out or producing the Caribbean about the Caribbean context is important and needs to be communicated to the Caribbean. And I think this statement supports that. And therefore, if there's that important need for us to know about the research that people are doing that has a Caribbean-based context, then it means that, as the summary says, your research is not just for you. You're not doing research only to make yourself happy, but you're doing research for others. You're doing research so that it could be communicated to a wider audience that includes your research colleagues and also includes persons who may not necessarily be part of that inner circle of research, but who would love to hear about what you are doing. So for researchers, and maybe at this point, persons could maybe raise their hands if they are in that area of research particularly, if we could do that. So I would be coming out from plant science. So for the other persons, all of us here in research strictly, or we may have other persons in the room. You can feel free to, to let me know in the chat if you are a researcher or you may be in a different area supporting research. You can be free to let me know in the chat so I don't leave you out when I'm communicating and sharing. So I look forward to seeing that. Right. So let me just, right, so Yolanda said research area. Thanks for that. And if persons are in some other areas, feel free to share that as well. And so while the sharing, I want to then go straight into that part about my summary where I said your research is not only for you, it is also for the public. So we want to do research. Why? Because the public wants to know, well, what you're doing. So tell me, is there any other reason why we would want to communicate our research? Persons could put it in the chat because I'll be able to use some of your answers and include it. Or if you wish, you can raise your hand and share, but why you would want to communicate. Because some people might say, I have enough to do. Dealing with suppliers, getting funding, grants. Some of us might be doing research and teaching. So you see this thing about now I have to go and do some kind of communication. That's not fitting on my plate. So maybe we'll have to deal a little bit with the why. I said, well, the public wants to know to help others make a positive change in their life. Thanks very much. Information, sharing new knowledge. So new things will come up. And so you want to let people know about the new things. That's important. Let me see if I missed any again. So we have to help others make a positive change in their life, for information, to share new knowledge. So we got some ideas of why. Some other reasons why as a researcher you'd want to share is because by sharing, you get feedback on what you're working on. Because it's like an elephant, it's this big elephant, and somebody might just be seeing the tail, and the next person seeing in front the horns. So that when you put the information out there, your research information out there, it means to say then that somebody might be seeing another side to your research that you just never thought of. And so you begin to even get new opportunities of how you could tackle other research questions. You may be able to find collaborators, and the same funding you may be worrying about, you may be able to discover that there's somebody who has a fund set up, or they're passionate about this particular cause and they want to contribute. So therefore, those are some good reasons why we would want to communicate. So we get the why out of the way. So let's move on to who you would want to communicate with. And just before we go to the who, because I know I mentioned about having your pen and paper, you for yourself write down a why. If it's networking, if it's collaboration, if it's to share more information about your particular topic, to increase awareness about certain hidden ills. I want you to write down your why on that piece of paper. I'm giving you 10 seconds because we're taking that why and we're going right through. So take your 10 seconds to write down your why you want to communicate what you're doing. Right, so by my time, the 10 seconds up. So what did I write down for my why? I got a little head start. So for my why, the one why is I would like to improve my skills in science communication, and I want to network. So that is sort of like my why in terms of communication as a psychom professional. I want to improve my skills, and I want to improve my skills on how I will share research, my own research, other person's research, and also that I will be able to network. That's my why. So you have your why, you have your one why, your one WHY. So then the question is, well, I have a why, I have a goal. The why and the goal goes together, you can say. So who is this why for in that sense? If I want to communicate and I have this why the reason why I want to communicate or a goal around my communication, then I'm not communicating only to myself, I'm communicating to the public. But you know, the public is not one group of person. And that's why you find in science communication, they talk about publics. So therefore, who might be a public? If you had to give your public a name, who, based on your why, who would be the person then? Who would be this audience you would want to communicate with? So I want to see some answers in the chat, and plus you writing it on your piece of paper. I will start the ball rolling by saying what my who. So my who, my audience, I will say two of them is the psychom or the psychom professionals, other persons who involve in science communication training. That's my audience. And another audience for me would be researchers who may need science communication help to communicate their work. So those are kind of like two groups. That would be my audience. So I could get two persons who would put in the chat what they wrote down or their thoughts on who might be their audience to communicate. So think about it quickly before I give you some ideas. So let me see if I could get at least, since I wanted to do a little work for the workshop. So I don't know if I missed anything in the chat yet. Any brave souls? Who might be that person? My audience would be the youths in the Dutch Caribbean islands. Thank you very much. I don't want to chance it to pronounce the name and get myself in trouble. But thanks so much. So the youth, the local community. So Yolanda, that local community, is that the local community? Oh, some marginalized groups in the local community is who would be your audience. Yeah, that's great. So so thanks for those two. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss any. Right, so we have the youth, local community, specifically marginalized groups. And I know that the concept of the marginalized group fits in really nicely with culture and identity, and reaching out to persons within the cultural space, within the geographical space. So it fits in nicely with the culture and identity theme. So as I said, I gave mine, who my audience would be. And the interesting thing is, there are some other big groups these include like journalists. And you know, sometimes researchers and journalists, it could be a love-hate relationship, but journalists, broadcasters, talk show hosts, even groups not often featured in research, right? Nice. That's great. And linked to that, maybe in a close way or far way, you're talking about then maybe even being able to affect policy then. You want to affect policy because when you start speaking to groups that are not heard and are marginalized, then you may be moving into policy issues. So therefore, one of our audiences could be policymakers, government officials, community-based organizations, interest groups. We saw some of those things tackled. We heard youth, and with youth, well, I believe the UN definition for youth goes up to the age 35. The UN definition. So bracket. So therefore, that means you could be trying to reach audiences of youth who are younger in terms of, let's say, we would use preschool, primary school, secondary school, or a little moving into being a little older in terms of tertiary, those who are in tertiary education setting. So you see now, public usually has an S when you're dealing with science communication because the publics have a lot of segments. And what a policy maker would want to hear or to know will be different from what a student in a 11-year-old in a primary or secondary school, or where you will call it, what they would want to know. And what a marginalized group of persons would want to know would maybe different, specific, particular, what a community-based organization, a faith-based organization, NGOs, interest groups, journalists would want to know will be different. And we shouldn't forget that even your colleagues then is like a group too. Your other research colleagues is also within the public definition, right? So we did the why, we did the who. You should have one who you're focusing on. So where these people are, you want to communicate with them, but where they are, or where we might find them. And that is where we get into the whole social media. I went to look up a definition for social media, and this definition I found. Social media are interactive technologies that facilitate the creation and sharing of information. And researchers have information to share. Sharing of ideas, sharing of interests, through, and I like this part, the building of virtual networks and communities. I haven't met you all yet. I did go to the Netherlands, but I haven't reached the Dutch Caribbean yet, but we still in a little community virtually doing Dutch Caribbean Research Week on the platform. And the fact is, on the social media platform, you have an opportunity to share information. And we already said we have information to share. And you have a virtual network and community. So you have audience. So you have a nice attachment here. We know why we want to communicate. We pinpoint a who and how we could do it. We could do it through social media. But we all realize that our audiences are maybe on all different types of social media platforms. You know, some people might say, well, no, I'm not on that platform, you know. No, I just be on that one. So therefore, you're going to write again. Where is your audience? If you had to choose a social media platform, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, even LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Reddit, Telegram, Instagram, Pinterest, where you think, some may know already, some may have to do a little guess, where your audience, that same audience,